My work, I kind of map out trauma and neuroscience, overlay that with somatic and mindfulness-based practices, and then work with energy medicine, which really creates a comprehensive set of tools
Mm.
to help people not only understand their trauma, but heal the trauma, but also how the trauma kind of resides within the cells and within the tissues, which then, yeah, certainly affects our physiology, right? That's going to compromise our immune system. That's going to create stagnation, which is going to create inflammation. That's going to jam up our emotions, which is just going to build up
Hmm.
energy that we don't know how to move through our system, right? I look at health as expression. I look at disease or illness as stagnation, right?
Welcome to the Spear and Clover podcast, where military mindset meets the spirit of the puppy. I'm your host, Jason Skisick, the entrepreneurial evangelist, and each week I bring you the stories of visionaries who see the world as it could be and can't help but take action. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and review. This is the best way to stay in the loop when we drop new content. Sharing this podcast with friends is the best way to ensure we can keep making them and bring on more and more interesting guests. In a culture where winners keep their head down and push through obstacles, pain, and trauma, Greg Weiting proposes a better way. Leadership and success not in spite of struggle, but in collaboration with it by working through unresolved issues. Greg helps leaders mine the gold of unresolved trauma to heal the anxiety, depression, and chronic pain that they can't think or talk their way out of. I am super excited to hear his story and learn from him. I bet you are too. Please welcome my friend, Greg Weiting. Greg, how are you?
Hey, Jason, I'm great. How you doing over there?
I'm great, man. I'm super excited for this conversation. This is the first time you and I have talked, which is atypical, but I had looked over your stuff. You reached out to me on the podcast matching service that we both used, and I'm just really excited to dig in from definitely a different angle than I've typically gone to before. So, before we get in too deep, why don't you tell the listeners and viewers about what it is that you do?
Absolutely. Yeah. I just find in this world, we are seeing just such a crisis in leadership.
Mm.
And I think a lot of us are spinning our wheels. And I'm really invested in kind of reverse engineering leadership and just looking at what is driving leadership and kind of deconstructing that drive, which is often a trauma response based on fear, based on a culture of isolation, separation, this hustle mentality that, is really getting in the way of our humanity, getting in the way of connection, and getting in the way of, I think, creating the solutions that we so desperately need in the world today.
Wow. So when you say you reverse engineer leadership and you talked about a trauma response, can you give us like an example of that? Because I'm listening to that and I'm like, that sounds awesome, but I don't quite have a good picture of what that means. So can you give me an example of like what you mean when you say a trauma response?
How much of our behaviors and beliefs are organized around this fight, this flight, this freeze, this appease response, right? When we've kind of lost access to our upper brain of reason and we are kind of defaulting to more of a survival response. And how much of our identity has been organized around that survival response that we don't even know it's what's running us. So, slowing down to kind of understand that drive and starting to kind of create new avenues to lead from a place of safety within ourselves. I think redefining leadership. A lot of people come to me, they've got all of the skills, right? They have all of the tools.
Yeah.
But do they have a presence of being, right? And so I think a big component of leadership is cultivating the psychological safety and trust within ourselves that then helps to regulate the collective nervous system. That kind of helps everybody land and settle inside themselves. So everyone can kind of locate their place within themselves, within their team, within the organization. Having a sense of a place and belonging is a really big component of how we show up in the world.
Yeah. And that's something that just as you're talking, I'm of course thinking about myself because, whatever, I'm flawed. But I just think of my team and how I would always, want them to feel like a part of the family. I think the struggle for me personally has been, at first, there's kind of evolutions of leadership, right? And when you first are a leader or you're trying to be, sometimes it's like you're trying to push a button. It's like, do, do, and you don't take into consideration the safety or the feelings of the person that's on the other end of that that's doing. I felt that very much when I was in the military, where somebody would say, we would always say how like you say something for 15 seconds and it ruins 40 hours of my week, like, hey, dig a hole right there. And then they come back a week later and they're like, why is this hole here? And it's like, well, you didn't even consider the stakeholders there. How do you help people that are leaders to walk the line between creating a safe space and demanding excellence in results?
Yeah, I mean, I think showing up from a place of authenticity does not outweigh the fact that we have a role and responsibility, right?
Yeah.
It's just, I think, understanding that the role we wear is not who we are. So that's not our identity, right? So can we locate an understanding of who we are, and then we can still play that role without conflating that role as our identity. And I think that just cleans up our energy a lot more, so that we can play the role, but with a sense of humanity, right? And, there's going to be deadlines, there's going to be urgency, and there can also be humility, right? I like the idea of humble confidence. And there's also accountability with that, right? There are consequences. So it doesn't mean that you're just a yes man to everyone, right? And so it's just no longer having to perform or hide parts of ourselves, so we can live in that role just in a place of being true to who we are. And I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think we can find a balance.
Yeah, that's really well said. I understand what you mean there. Well, maybe let's take a step back real quick. How did we end up here? How did you find your way into the business that you're now coaching folks through this type of stuff?
Yeah, well, I used to work in the nonprofit world, and I used to run a team of 25, 30 people, very purpose-driven, but really lacked fulfillment. I felt in my race to do good in the world, I was really destroying myself. And that's when I really started to come to terms with the anxiety and the depression that was kind of running inside of me. And that was getting amplified and exaggerated in my position of leadership. And so I really had to kind of interrogate what's beneath all of this. And so that kind of led me on a path of healing, to understand kind of the unresolved trauma that was really kind of beneath the surface of all of my pain. And, as I explored that journey of healing, I had an opportunity to kind of come back into some leadership roles in the world of organizing and politics, and that just no longer fit for me. And so, I opened up a healthcare practice, and, so I help people heal their trauma, the anxiety and the depression. But I've always had a bent for kind of leadership and for social impact. And so really the intersection of those worlds, and I found that's the people who kind of just naturally found me were leaders and founders and entrepreneurs who had built so much of their success, but from a trauma response, right? This hustling for their own worth and having to like prove themselves to, whether it's their parents or to themselves or to some external, whoever it may be. And realizing that while that may have helped build some level of success, it may also be what's going to, actually put it all at risk. And so kind of doing that cost payoff analysis and kind of finding, all right, this strategy got me so far, but it's going to become more of a detriment if I hold on to it for much longer. So how do I develop new strategies? And while new strategies are a part of it, it's actually understanding the old strategies and then developing new capacities within ourselves to no longer have to depend on the old strategies. And, a lot of energy can free up if we're not having to hustle for our own worth, if we're not driven by fear, right? If we're not feeling separate and alone, if we feel a sense of support and connection within our communities, within our teams, within our world. So kind of shifting a lot of that lone wolf mentality in leadership as well.
Yeah, I literally, within a minute, went from a conversation that was about that to this conversation. I'm going to leave it at that because, for privacy, but like I literally was just having that conversation. And I've had the conversation with entrepreneurs and with, career office men and women where it's, my dad had a heart attack at 41 and, worked himself into the grave, felt that he had to, like I love how you say, earn your worth or, work for your worth or whatever it is. The phrase that you said was just brilliant. And I've seen that so many times. And when I hear it, I'm like, oh, people don't still think that way, do they? And I've been surprised at how many, the more I've been out here talking to other entrepreneurs, how many folks think that the only way is to grind themselves and to continue to push that big stone up the hill every single day. And it's so refreshing to hear you helping folks to break through that. I hear you talking about what I think leads to physiology, I've heard you talk about fight or flight. I've heard you talk about practice. I've heard you talk about healthcare. How much of this is physiological? Or do you work with folks on breathing or meditation or things that are actually helping, their literal vital signs and helping them through things?
Yeah. I look at all this as connected. So yeah, my work, I kind of map out trauma and neuroscience, overlay that with somatic and mindfulness-based practices, and then work with energy medicine, which really creates a comprehensive set of tools to help people not only understand their trauma, but heal the trauma, but also how the trauma kind of resides within the cells and within the tissues, which then certainly affects our physiology, right? That's going to compromise our immune system. That's going to create stagnation, which is going to create inflammation. That's going to jam up our emotions, which is just going to build up energy that we don't know how to move through our system, right? I look at health as expression. I look at disease or illness as stagnation, right? And so, completely tied together. So as we start to broaden our window of tolerance and have a greater capacity to kind of navigate the stress of life, that is going to have a ripple effect on our physiology and our biology, on our cell structure and how the whole system functions as a whole. I like the analogy that the body and mind are kind of a symphony orchestra. And when we're experiencing health, that symphony orchestra is making a whole lot of music, right? Yeah. And when there's stress, when there's trauma, the nervous system gets short-circuited. So what was this music is now starting to break up and create a lot of noise. So, healing is really helping to break up the noise and just return the body, mind, spirit back into a harmonic resonance, right? And so it's not about fixing or changing anything. It's just about breaking up the noise. We're highly adaptive, right? So we learn how to navigate the world with these maladaptations to stress, right? So we then learn how to make it through the world without making much music, while we're making a lot of noise. But that's gonna catch up with us eventually, and so that's gonna have an impact. A big piece of trauma is the perpetuating patterns of isolation, patterns of lacking safety and support. Some would argue that cardiovascular disease is an illness of isolation, right? Like alcoholism and lots of addiction is, a disease of alienation and isolation. So, when we heal trauma, we start to develop a deeper sense of connection, not only to ourselves, but to the world. We start to derive a greater sense of place and meaning so we can make sense of these significant experiences in our life, however traumatic they may be. And as we start to kind of dissolve those imprints of alienation and isolation, that's going to take a load off the heart. Right. So clients that I have worked with that have been struggling with addiction, I'm not so much focused on the addiction. I'm focused on the pain and the isolation beneath the addiction. And if we can help people feel supported in their pain, so they're no longer alone in their pain, they can heal their pain. And then the addictive behaviors organized around the pain to try to protect from pain, start to shift. They start to augment and often fall away.
Oh, that's brilliant. And I'm going to preface this by saying I believe and agree with you when you talk about the connection to our cells and our cardiovascular function and our endocrine system and all these things that are connected to our stress load and our trauma and the feelings about it. I agree with it. I'm just looking for more information, more depth. So my question would be, are there things we can point to that are measurable specifically, that you can specifically say this person's heart rate is higher or this person's cholesterol is higher or this, when you talk about it's stored in our cells, what do you literally mean by that?
Yeah. So, our connective tissue and fascia is really what holds us together, right? It's also where we store emotions, beliefs, memories, and trauma. So the subconscious and the unconscious mind are living inside the body. So, what we think we believe, our conscious mind is just like the tip of the iceberg. And the underbelly of the iceberg is the subconscious, unconscious beliefs that are really running the show, living in our cells and our tissues. I can just share my own experience. So part of my healing journey was the chronic pain that was tied into a severe curve in my spine. So as I started to explore healing, which included a lot of the tools I shared today, energy medicine, mindfulness, somatic work, I was receiving energy medicine from a practitioner who was starting to balance, coming back to that symphony orchestra imagery, starting to balance some hormones to some beliefs, to some memories, to some emotions, right? All those hormones, memories, and beliefs kind of start to create an entire costume, an entire identity, right? So if the trauma that had been stored in my body had, my identity thinking it's not safe to be in the world, I'm gonna be hurt, I'm a victim of circumstance, that's kind of creates a costume, right? That is then the overall posture of the body, right? So as different vibrations within my system, again, emotions, thoughts, beliefs, memories started to come into a more of a harmonic resonance, my spine just started to unravel, right? It wasn't through a forceful chiropractic adjustment. I stand 3 inches taller today. This didn't all happen overnight. It's been a good 15, 20-year journey as, again, I'm making sense of traumatic experience in my life that once my entire identity was organized around. Healing helps me step outside of that pain imprint to then orient to possibility and to live more into, the truth of who I am. Then the whole organizational intelligence of my body can repattern itself. And so, but yeah, there's studies around Reiki, helping to calm the cardiovascular system. There's a marked increase in white blood cell activity. It's helping to shift us from the sympathetic fight flight response to the parasympathetic rest and digest. So yeah, there's all sorts of data out there that backs that up. Another story working with a client that had a football sized fibroid that, I said, well, if we work together, we're going to look at, the emotional components that were stored in your system, which turned out to be a lot of grief around some loss, tied into fear. And then what are all the beliefs and behaviors that get organized around that? Trauma is an experience that's too much too soon and where we lack the support to process and make sense of it. So it gets stored inside our cells and our tissues. So healing helps to slow it down, to build more capacity to then process what historically was too much too soon, so the system can start to metabolize it, process it, make sense of it. So then as those emotions get metabolized and released, then how they got stored in that fibroid starts to shrink and dissolve.
Wow. Today's show is brought to you by High Level CRM. High Level is an all-in-one platform designed to help entrepreneurs grow their businesses without the need for multiple softwares or an IT team. Not only does their easy-to-use software allow you to track and manage your leads throughout each phase of the relationship, but it also allows you to build funnels, track stats, and more. Guys, I sat down and added up the cost of software I was able to replace with just one app, and it was over $1,000 per month. Because this is an all-in-one application, I also save a ton of headaches connecting apps and building automations, and the team at Go High Level does a great job of getting you started quickly and easily when you sign on. I cannot more highly recommend these guys. Right now, Spear and Clover listeners get a free 14-day trial of High Level CRM for themselves. Click the link in our show notes to support the show and get started on your free 14-day trial today. I'm super excited that today's show is brought to you by the Global School of Entrepreneurship. Most practicing entrepreneurs cannot take 2 years away from their growing business to attend a full-time campus-based program or spend every weekend away from family and business for a couple of years. Finally, there's an accredited program specifically designed for you to work on and grow your business while completing your MBA. The GSE MBA complements the needs and schedules of someone actively engaged in an entrepreneurial venture while still covering the accredited curriculum expected from any MBA program. The Global School of Entrepreneurship offers a unique offering called the Mastermind to MBA program. It consists of 10 students who work together in a forum-style cohort and meet every other week for a year. The GSE MBA helps you develop skills in critical thinking and strategic planning. Students also develop competencies in leadership, decision-making, and communication with both employees as well as the important stakeholders in your business. You will be exposed to world-class academics and fascinating guest lecturers. You'll work on your business while working in your business. Students are guided by real-world entrepreneurs with decades of experience starting and scaling businesses just like yours. Best of all, I'm beyond proud to announce that the Global School of Entrepreneurship has agreed to offer one Spear and Clover listener a scholarship to join an upcoming Mastermind to MBA cohort. They are looking for someone just like you to bring a unique perspective to the program, and they are accepting applications right now. To learn more and to apply, simply go to www.gse.mba/spear. That's www.gse.mba/spear. Don't miss this opportunity to level yourself up and surround yourself with other like-minded entrepreneurs just like you. Once again, to apply for the GSE MBA Spear and Clover Scholarship, simply visit www.gse.mba/spear. That's www.gse.mba/spear. Today's show is brought to you by Scaling with Media. I mean, literally, like if it weren't for the folks at Scaling with Media, you would not be getting this. Scaling with Media is a truly revolutionary company for any entrepreneur who wants to reach a larger audience without taking on the years of experience necessary to master the required skills. These guys do it all. From helping you develop your creative plan to editing, sourcing content, copywriting, ads management, and way more. Whether you're looking to launch a YouTube channel or podcast, or you just want to scale your business out to more eyeballs, these guys are the absolute best one-stop shop. But that's not all. Right now, Spear and Clover listeners who sign up for their brand launch package will receive a free, that's right, free professional grade studio kit that I'm actually recording right now on. The studio kit includes a professional microphone, stand, lighting, and headphones, and is worth well over $500. Take action now by going to scalingwithmedia.com/spear and claim your free studio kit. Again, that's scalingwithmedia.com/spear, scalingwithmedia.com/spear. Now back to the show. That's fascinating. So now you've mentioned Reiki, and I'm just a total novice. I have no real pre-existing understanding of what it is, and probably most of the folks listening to the show don't know what that is either. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what Reiki is, and sort of we'll go from there.
Sure. Yeah, Reiki was developed in Japan over 100 years ago. It is applied through the laying of the hands. It's really, again, this point of contact where we no longer feel isolated and alone, right? And there's just tons of research around the power of touch. Again, touch that calms the cardiovascular system, activates white blood cell activity. Again, that sense that we're not separate, but we're connected. So touch is really the only sense we can't live without. It's just a vital sense. And so through the laying of hands, Reiki is defined as universal life force energy. It's just helping us connect, right? Again, trauma really makes us feel separate from the whole. And so healing, especially through the lens of Reiki, is helping us to feel reconnected to the whole. When I first was introduced to Reiki, it was, what really introduced me to, an entire healing practice. I was living in so much chronic pain that a friend who was a massage therapist offered me a massage, and physical touch just was too painful. I didn't want a massage. So she offered me Reiki. She said, hands-on touch for relaxation. I said, well, it can't hurt. And I realized I found something I didn't even know I was looking for. I definitely wasn't looking for energy medicine. You can't look for what you don't know is out there. But my whole system just started to take a deep exhale, and just patterns of tension that I didn't even know were there, or it was just those patterns of tension were all I knew. Right. So I had no concept that I could actually start to let go of that tension. So yeah, that was pretty remarkable. So within a year, I started to study Reiki, which then led me to other forms of energy medicine, and then mindfulness and somatics, and then building in kind of a understanding in trauma and neuroscience. So that's kind of what I fused together. And how I help leaders today kind of, stop being driven from that fight, flight, and more from a place of presence.
It's very fascinating. I can tell you that I don't know about the stuff that you do, but I can tell you that I suffered from a chronic knee and leg pain issue. And at the time I owned a CrossFit gym for many years, and still own a small part of it. And I could squat over 400 pounds. And all of a sudden, kind of out of nowhere, I think it was an imbalance. All of a sudden, I just had tons of pain in my middle of my leg, in my knee area, and it lasted forever. And it was so much that stepping up a stair was like an 80% effort. Just walking up a stair was an 80% effort. By the way, during this time, I hiked the Machu Picchu Trail, which is like nothing but stairs up and down mountains for like 10 hours or something crazy. And each step was like an 80% effort. And I just remember I was in a float tank, and I remember just like giving myself permission to heal. And it had been like 2 years. And then within like a month, it was just gone. And so you talk about storing things in your fascia, and shout out to Dr. Mike Risher, who may be viewing this. He's a great chiro that works out of our facility, and he's great with that stuff. But yeah, it could be fascia, it could be muscles. I don't care if it's the placebo effect. It's fixed. And it was a decision that I had made to like allow myself to heal. And all of a sudden it just kind of cleared up. And I didn't have the benefit of the Reiki and stuff you're talking about, but I can definitely attest to like, there's more going on than just, did you do the exercises, or did you take the supplements, or did you get a shot or take a pill or whatever? Do you do anything like the Wim Hof stuff? Have you dabbled in that at all?
Not formally. I mean, I definitely jump in lots of cold rivers and jump in the ocean here, but no, I haven't done like formal soaks. And there's some hot springs here where there are cold plunges. Yeah, but I haven't like studied with Wim Hof or like know his exact technique. But yeah, over the years, again, as my nervous system has found more balance, I've noticed, I can handle sitting in the cold plunge much longer than I used to. And I used to just jump in and lose my breath and pop back out. And now it's like, no, I can actually like hang out there for a little bit. And so, back to what you were saying, just about giving yourself permission to heal. That's kind of like getting the mind in alignment with the body, so they're not like fighting against each other. And, a lot of my work is organized with the understanding of innate wisdom, which is a term coined by chiropractors. And, I liken the innate wisdom to like a healing mechanism within the body that is, if you get a paper cut, that innate wisdom sends platelets and proteins and orchestrates all these healing transmissions that are happening without us thinking about it, right? And so healing is just helping us align with that innate wisdom. So that natural healing mechanism that is present within all of us comes more to the forefront, right? We can kind of suppress it, forget about it, become disconnected from it. So it's reconnecting to that innate wisdom. And that really allows the entire system to function, at its highest capacity.
Yeah, that's interesting too. So when you're working with folks, first of all, who's like your core demographic of somebody that you would want to work with? Do you work with individuals? Do you work with teams from the same company? What are the best circumstances for you to help folks?
Yeah, both. I work one-on-one, and I also have an online course, which is an online community. So people, I can have entire teams access that. They're still going through an internal process, but it's nice when people in the same community kind of then have the same vocabulary and the same language. But yeah, primarily folks are finding me because they understand that the trauma is a contributing factor to their anxiety, their depression, and their pain, right? And they're looking to kind of resolve the trauma that they haven't been able to kind of work through. And, a lot of people come to me and when they're at the end of their rope, another client came to me after being in, medical debt after 2 years of seeing over 100 doctors, right? And no one being able to connect how the trauma had imprinted on, the physical body, right? So the tools I have are really well equipped to kind of work from both ends. So the residue of trauma, because a lot of people go through years of therapy, which is, saving their lives. It's very helpful. They have a new intellectual understanding of their pain and their trauma. So they're maybe not as mentally distraught, but the residue of that trauma is still playing a role in their physical health. So yeah, anxiety, depression, chronic pain, all organized around trauma is what brings people to me.
That's fascinating. So a lot of times, first of all, I talk to entrepreneurs primarily on this show. And a lot of times it comes from one of two directions. It is somebody who grew up thinking, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to start a company. I want to be in control of my own destiny. Let's go out and find a mission. And then the other side of it is I have a mission. I really have no desire to be an entrepreneur, but damn it, I need to impact the world. This needs to happen. I think I kind of see where you're coming from, but where do you think you fall on that spectrum?
Yeah, I wasn't looking to be an entrepreneur.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like, I was working in the nonprofit world, but after my life had changed so profoundly with these healing practices, I thought, who am I not to share this with the world? And yeah, I'm in a phase now of kind of shifting a lot of my work to my online community and building that. And yeah, I was on a call with another entrepreneur earlier today, and it's easier for me to just sit back and be the healer. It challenges me a lot more to step into the role of entrepreneur.
Sure.
And yet that's also where the growth is. So that's a big piece of the intersection. I think that entrepreneurship and leadership can become a pathway to better understanding who we are. It can be a healing path. It can be a spiritual practice. There's so much to learn as we're breaking through upper limits and, these perceived limitations we have about, who we are and what's possible and what we're made of. And even if we break through those upper limits, it's like, then can we also land within ourselves so we're not on overdrive with this pedal to the metal, right? We can, actually maybe enjoy the ride and become more present and feel connected, right? So yeah, I find a lot of folks find me when they've built all the success, but they're kind of feeling that emptiness, the burnout, and maybe they're just not able to enjoy their success or just enjoy, their loved ones because their heads always spinning in what's going on with work.
Well, I'm sure I'm not the first person to say this, but I look forward to seeing your book eventually because there seems to be a very interesting and unique point of view. And I bet you would have a heck of a book if you ever wrote one.
I appreciate it. Well, so yeah, my online course, the workbooks are kind of the trauma and neuroscience roadmap. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's only a matter of time before we kind of restructure the workbook of the course into just a book that's more accessible for folks.
Yeah, I've known folks to do that, and it's a really good way to kind of get your message out to other folks. So there are 2 questions that I ask everybody that comes on this show, and I'd like to ask you those 2 questions now. Are you ready, Greg?
Sure.
All right. Question number 1, if you had access to unlimited financial capital, how would you profitably grow your current business?
A big piece of where I am looking to scale my work is to make healing accessible in prisons, in schools, in corporate settings, in government organizations, really mainstreaming healing. And so I think a piece of that is, just building the right support in terms of influence. And so, yeah, a big piece would be, the messaging and the support in terms of marketing to really blow it up and get it just out into, the hearts and minds of everyone out there.
Yeah, great. The second question is, if you had to quit doing what you're doing now and everything you've ever done in the past, and you had to start something totally new, what do you think that might be?
Art and a return to activism. And I see that's kind of merging as my work evolves and as I'm able to scale my programming and make it more accessible. That'll also I'm kind of building out the framework to carve out more time and space for art and activism. And yeah, and they'll all be connected. I can't separate these pieces, but if I had to separate it, it would just be art for art's sake.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I always can tell when somebody's not like really dedicated to their mission. Because I'll ask, like, what would you do if you couldn't do this? And they're like, I don't know, own a surf shop or paint. Like, because I love what I'm doing so much. Well, Greg, this has been fantastic. Why don't you give our guests a very, shout out anything you want to plug? Where can they find you? Where can, obviously we'll have our show notes with all of your links on them, but, maybe whatever you have to plug.
Yeah, prismamethod.com is where you can learn about the online course, which I've kind of mentioned. There's the Trauma Neuroscience Roadmap, which is kind of offered through an 8-week course with workbooks and audio lessons. And then there's the somatic and mindfulness-based practices that people have 9 months access to 3 monthly calls with me. And then there's the energy medicine training, which is a monthly workshop over 9 months where you're learning an entire self-care healing practice. And again, all those elements kind of feed into one another to kind of create a comprehensive healing system. So prismamethod.com for folks that want to work with me one-on-one, gregweiting.com, Wieting. And that just starts with a phone call. Let's just have a conversation and to see if we can get along well and become a good team in helping you heal.
Great. Well, Greg, I look forward to seeing you, taking your mission further and further. And I really appreciate you taking time to come on the show. Thank you so much, Greg. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you guys so much for watching or listening to the show. If you enjoyed the show, please don't forget to show us some love by liking, rating, and subscribing so we can keep making more and better content. If you'd like to support the show and get a great additional content like exclusive shows and even live group masterminds, please head over to patreon.com/spearandclover to become a member of the tribe. If you're interested in learning more about how we help entrepreneurs, visit spearandclover.com or message us on any of our platforms. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.